I'm Tom from Do-It-Yourself Home Automation, and today I'm here to talk about the CA Notify app. So if you're a Californian, if you're living in the state, you probably this morning got a notification on your phone about the CA Notify app. And you might be wondering what it is. Is it something you should download? And I'm just going to talk a little bit about it. I've been following this as a tech journalist on Medium at 10 and Debugger for months now. This is an app that's built on a framework that I'll talk a little bit about that does, I think, a really interesting and really good job of allowing you to get COVID-19 notifications from your phone and use your phone almost like a contact tracer that works automatically while still protecting your privacy and doing a really good job, I think, of also not using too many resources on your phone. So a lot of people in California today woke up to a notification that said exposure tracking, download this app. If you click through on that, you'd get to CA Notify. And you might be wondering what this is and what it does. And basically, it's a new app. It's built on a framework that was actually developed not by the state of California exactly, but by Google and Apple. So it's a pretty rare situation where these two tech giants come together and collaborate on something, but it's something they actually created together to better track COVID-19 notifications and exposure notifications on people's phones. And so, it sort of seems like it should be obvious that you could use your phone to determine if you've been around somebody who got COVID-19. Your phone has a GPS chip. It has all kinds of other sensors. It's constantly logging your location. So it feels like, you should be able to just pretty easily store that information somewhere, maybe send it off to some kind of database. If enough people are doing that and sending their locations off, and then one of them gets COVID and reports that they got COVID, then somebody could go to that database, look up everybody who's been near them over the last 2 weeks and notify those people that they had exposure. And so that seems like it should be doable with existing technologies. But there's a handful of problems with that. One of them is privacy, obviously. So, how many people would consent to an app that's constantly tracking their location and putting it into a giant government database? Probably not that many, hopefully not that many. And there's also a lot of technical issues with that. Constantly monitoring your location and sending it off to a central database consumes a ton of power, so it would draw down the battery on your phone very quickly. It also would use a lot of data if it was doing this continuously, and it could impact the performance on your phone, especially if you had to run an app in the background. So some countries, some organizations have tried to do these kinds of notification apps that use a central database, but it just hasn't been very successful because people, again, don't want to just stream that data constantly to the government, nor do they want to, wear down the battery on their phone and have to be charging their phone constantly because of their using it. So this system does something different. Again, it's built by Apple and Google, and it's a really, I think, elegant solution. It uses the Bluetooth chip in your phone to constantly send out a beacon that lists a unique ID. And that ID is tied to your phone, changes periodically, but it's not tied to your identity in any way. So it tells people your phone is there, but not who you are. And anyone who's using the app or any of the apps that are built on this framework, their phones will also be constantly sending out this beacon. So if you download the app, your phone starts to look for these beacons using the Bluetooth chip that's on it. And it's very low power, so it doesn't draw down your battery. It's not going to be an issue in terms of your phone's performance, and it can all happen in the background. So it's looking for these beacons. It's recording how long you spend around each beacon. So if you're in a room with somebody and their phone is sending out a beacon because they have the app, your phone will let you know about how close you were to them and how long you spent around them. And it'll log that data on the phone itself. It won't send that off anywhere. So that minimizes the risk. There's going to be privacy issues and tracking and that kind of thing. So you're maintaining your own list of these little beacons. Your phone is also sending out its own beacon so that other people in your environment who have the app can see that you're there, and their phones are all logging locally, again, not to some central location, all the interactions they've had with you. So all of that's being stored, and your phone will keep that data for a specific amount of time. Again, because it's built on this sort of low-level protocol created by Apple and Google that uses your phone's Bluetooth chip. It's, again, very low battery consumption, very good for performance, and it can run totally in the background on your phone without impacting your other apps. Then, if somebody gets COVID, they can actually go into their own app. And this is a story that I wrote up here. You can go to tomsmith585.medium.com if you want to see a little bit more about what I've written about this recently. But if somebody else gets COVID, then they can go to this tab on their phone, notify others, and you can log, or they can log, their positive status that they just found out that they did get the virus. Now, what happens when when they do that is the app will send out a notification anonymously to everyone else who is using the app, and it will say the unique ID of that person who became infected. Again, not their name, not any information that would be personally identifying, just their ID. And your phone will look for these notifications each day, and it'll compare the IDs it's receiving against the ones that it has stored, the people you've been around. And if it finds a match and it finds that you've been around one of these people based on their ID for a substantial amount of time, it will actually notify you that you've had a potential exposure. And then you can do whatever you want with that. You could go get tested. You could say, okay, well, I just know about it now. You could try to see over time, how many exposures am I getting? Can I take steps that would minimize the number? I just downloaded the app. I have not had any exposures. I've only been using it for about 20 minutes, so that's not particularly surprising. It's a very simple app overall, though. You can see the notifications of exposures. You can notify others if you yourself become infected. Other than that, it's a pretty basic user interface, and you don't have to do anything to have it look for these beacons from other phones or send out your own beacon. Now, some public health authorities aren't thrilled about this. Many of them wanted a central database because it would allow them to do better tracking and monitoring and notifying of people. Right now, if you get an exposure notification, nobody knows that you've gotten that. It's personal. It's on your own phone. So authorities can't contact you based on that. They can't use you for contact tracing. I think that's a good thing from a privacy perspective, but some public health authorities wanted to have a more centralized system where they could reach out to people who had been exposed and maybe provide resources. But again, I think that's a really challenging situation from a privacy perspective to open up. So I think this is a much better and more elegant solution. This framework is something that, again, both Apple and Google collaborated on together. Pretty rare for these two tech giants to come together and do something like that. So it's pretty remarkable that they actually created this common framework. And then states and governments can create their own apps on top of that framework. And again, California just launched theirs today. That's December the 10th, 2020. Other states have done this first, though. I think California took a longer time because we're a bigger state. But about, I think, 19 other US states have already launched systems of their own. You can look through this 9to5Mac page where they've been tracking these systems. You can see if your own state is in this list. If you're not a Californian, so Colorado, Arkansas, or Arizona, Alabama, several of these states have already implemented their own version of the app. So you can go in and see if your state is on the list if you're not a Californian. So the big question is, should you download this? I think, if you're concerned about privacy, which I'm always concerned about privacy, I do think that this is a pretty elegant solution and does a reasonably good job of protecting your privacy while still keeping you informed. I also think that it puts the power into the hands of consumers in terms of monitoring their own exposures. So you're not beholden to a government that might not be doing a great job in some cases of keeping you informed about potential exposures. This is something that's happening on your own phone and that you can be in control of, and you can decide what to do if you get an exposure notification, whether that's just saying, okay, now I know, or going out and getting tested for every single one. I think one thing we're going to have to see is how this evolves over time and how people use it. So obviously to work well, there's a network effect. A lot of people have to have the app in order for it to actually be effective. So if just you are using this or a handful of people are using it, then you're not going to be around people who are broadcasting the beacons. And even if there are people who are getting exposed, you're probably not going to know about it. So other people have to have the app in order for you to get their beacon and to know if they get exposed. They also have to report it if they do have a positive test, which not everybody will necessarily do. So I think adoption is a big piece of this. We'll see how many people adopt it. And then another piece is how many false positives are there from a tech perspective. if you drive by somebody and your phone picks up their beacon and they later test positive for COVID, will you get a notification, or will the app correctly filter out those kinds of really tangential exposures and focus on the real ones? I don't think we're really going to know about that until more people use the apps and we get more experience. I also wonder how this is going to play out socially. Are people going to start posting their, no exposures thing on their phone as a badge of honor to say, hey, I'm following social distancing, I'm not going out. I don't know. Maybe people will. Maybe this will become a social media meme or something like that. So I think it's just going to be really interesting to see. But, I downloaded the app. It's a personal decision whether you should as well. But I downloaded the app. And if you have any questions about it, I'm live here. Feel free to ask. I've been studying this. I've been following the story for several months since the original launch. You can also find me at tomsmith585.medium.com or debugger.medium.com, where I've been doing a lot of my reporting recently. 10.medium.com is another place where I've covered some of the privacy implications of these apps. You can also find me on Twitter at tomsmith585, or feel free to ask any questions in the comments section down below, even after this is live, and I'm happy to chime in to answer those and hopefully direct you to some resources. So that's the CA Notify app. Thanks for tuning in, and let me know again in the comments what you think.